This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, June the 26th. Already the end of June? Man, time does fly. On this episode of The Word, wow weather just across North America. It has been absolutely insane. Hey, we've got some great new news. A few heads up. The beast is back. Unfortunately, we are going to have to talk about fusarium in the wheat crop because, yowza, there is some out there. And we'll get through a bunch of agronomy answers at the end. I hope to get to managing for big yields because in Western Canada, for once, maybe you're there. So hopefully we can get to that. Let's go! Wow, weather. Man, where it rains, it just keeps hammering and hammering. The people in the Glencoe area of Ontario, you just got to shake your head and say, my gosh, can it be any tougher to get crop planted? Meanwhile, in some of the other areas, all of a sudden we get these flash just absolute deluges, like not just a thunderstorm. It's like the sky opens up 6 inches in under an hour near Prospect Hill, which is not too far away from Peter Johnson's farm. Peter Johnson got 0.3 of an inch, 7 millimeters, and just a little ways away, 6 inches. The erosion that this has caused is just horrendous. The amount of hay that has been just spoiled beyond recognition. Oh, all this hay is supposed to be green and it just looks yellow, like it should be wheat straw is what it looks like. Meanwhile, this is horrendous in Ontario. There's lots of challenges. There are also some amazing crops in Ontario. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we think we've got it bad. In northeastern Nebraska, 21 inches of rain in 3 days, if you can imagine that. Oh my gosh, that 21 inches of rain in 3 days, that's hard to fathom, to be perfectly honest. That is like 2/3 of the rain that Ontario would get in a 3-day period. Wow. How crops could handle that is a little bit bizarre to sort that out. By the way, because there are lots of questions coming in about, Peter, like how long can crops take being flooded? And so the typical answer, and every crop is a little different, so edible beans don't take being flooded quite as well as soybeans do, and soybeans aren't quite as good as corn, generally speaking. So there is a range, but most of the time you can be flooded underwater for 48 hours, and the crop will survive and produce pretty respectably. Believe it or not, it can actually stand in water longer if there are leaves above the water to get some oxygen. So some plants, like oats, can actually pipe oxygen from the air. If they have a leaf up there, wheat can do this as well, not quite as well as oats, but they take oxygen and they put it down into the root to keep the root alive. Barley, on the other hand, cannot do that at all. But I scouted soybeans on Monday, and I could not believe, but there were duck ponds in the field that had turned green, clearly had been there for several days, and the soybeans were poked above the water. The ones that were above the water were still green and looked like they were alive and had a chance of producing a crop. So don't give up. But if you don't have the crop out of the ground, then 48 hours is sort of the best that it gets. Meanwhile, the heat last week, talk about corn weather. Oh my gosh. Nature Nut Nick, I mentioned that he got his soybeans planted. He saw his soybeans twice Not in a week. I mean, we generally say twice in a week, you're awesome. He saw them twice in 5 days. That would mean edible beans, because they come up even quicker. Some growers will have seen edible beans twice in 4 days. That is how much heat we had. The corn was adding a leaf at least every 3 days, maybe every 2.5 days. It's almost unheard of to see crops jump that fast. It was one of those weeks where if you were sitting on the porch late at night after dark beside a cornfield, you could actually hear the corn growing, because warm night temperatures really make corn grow. And we just 32, 33, 34 degree daytime temperatures, almost too hot for corn, not quite, but those warm nights, or things, corn and soybeans absolutely just jumping. Dale Cowan, Agris Co-op, says that at Ridgetown we are 220 crop heat units ahead of last year. We're at 1,000 crop heat units already on the 23rd or 24th of June. That's massive. We are way ahead of normal. There's no doubt about that. Meanwhile, on the wheat front, oh my gosh, the wheat front, we just are absolutely getting hammered last week. We're back into wheat weather right now. This is pretty good. But when temperatures go over 30 degrees, there's French research says you lose a bushel per acre per day for every day that the temperature goes over 25 degrees Celsius during grain fill. We're over 30, so we are probably giving up in the range of 2 bushels per acre per day. I'm not a doomsday sayer. That was 2 bushels per acre per day off what looks to be an amazing wheat crop. So if we started with 160 bushel yield potential and we lost 15 bushels, we're still at 145 bushel yield potential. So don't say Johnson is a doomsday guy, because I'm absolutely not. I still have great hopes we're going to have an awesome crop. Wheat harvest is underway as of Tuesday. I understand there were growers hoping to get to the field, although I think the rain may have kept them out. But we are right at the beginning of wheat harvest, and it is June the 26th. Which is at least a week, if not 10 days or 2 weeks ahead of normal for that part of the world. However, there are some other crops that also got hit pretty hard. I mentioned that Tyler wondered how the heat would affect his oat crop. He had such a good oat crop coming. He walked through it, and he sent me a message saying, Peter, I think 20% of the florets have aborted from the heat. They were pollinating right at the worst time. And this is one of the things about planting date. I mean, gosh, you plant early, you get bigger yields on cereal crops, and the reason is because you have grain fill in a cooler period. Every once in a while, because Tyler planted his oats in February, pretty tough to get earlier than February, but every once in a while, they head out earlier. It should be the best time possible. Every once in a while, they head out, and you just get in the exact wrong period. Sorry, Tyler, that happens once in a while. You'll still have an awesome oat crop. It just won't be as awesome as you hoped. And I've talked about all the heat. Dan from Idaho sending me pictures of spring wheat that was frozen almost to the ground. Now, fortunately, it was at 5-leaf stage. The growing point hadn't quite made it above ground, and I think that spring wheat is okay. But we're cooking, and they're freezing, and that's just the way that it's working this year. Okay, I need to move on because I always talk too long. But hey, we have some awesome new news. A Group 12 herbicide has been registered in eastern Canada, so diflufenatin is the very first Group 12 herbicide registered for corn and soybeans and perhaps edible beans. I'm not sure exactly what the label is yet, but so a new group, means that hopefully we have another tool in the toolbox to fight against resistant weeds. And I'm not saying that the weeds won't develop resistance quickly, and I'm not sure what the spectrum is, but it's still awesome news because we haven't had a new mode of action registered in Ontario in I don't know how long. I'm sure somebody will tell me, and maybe I'll put it on next week's word, but oh my gosh, excellent news. So that's a real upside on the plus front. On the weed control front, Peter Sikma today, we've talked about weed control, and in corn, when you have heavy weed pressure, it's 1.7 bushels per acre per day. At the Ag Business Breakfast meeting on Tuesday morning, Peter was there, and I asked him, I said, so that's the number on corn. What about soybeans? He didn't have it off the top of his head. He looked up in a presentation. He says, well, what I can tell you, and there are a lot of dirty soybean fields out there, growers struggling to get them in, winds, rain, struggling to get them sprayed. But if you have heavy weed pressure and you allow the weeds in your soybean field to get from 2-inch height to 3-inch height, you just lost 2 bushels per acre. And so what's that take in the heat of last week? Does that take 3 days to add an inch on weed growth? This timely weed control, this start clean, stay clean, man, it really is a huge deal that we continue to have to talk about, continue to have to focus on. All right, I want to move on, and here's a great question from Perry. He called me up and he said, Peter, what is going on? Like, even in the disc-ripped fields, man, you can just see patterns, and it looks like it's on the angle that the disc ripper ran. In other fields, no-till fields, we're seeing all sorts of poor growth with residue. My great friend Rob Templeman, just such an awesome farmer, and where he didn't get the residue spread perfectly last fall, and they try hard. Cohen, he's attention to detail, does the best job you can do. Man, where they doubled up the residue, you can see it in the soybeans. Horsespawner long ago said residue is the enemy. There is no doubt about that. Some people call it the carbon penalty, but you would wonder, how can it be a carbon penalty when we're using a disc ripper and incorporating all that residue? It's not like it's on the soil surface. Where we double the residue up, we are probably keeping the soil colder and wetter. The residue, after it breaks down, might help drainage, but in the short term, it can act like a mat to impede that drainage. The other thing that happens with residue is that as it breaks down, remember, we've been warm, as it breaks down, it releases organic acids, which reduce the growth of the plants. So there's some weird stuff going on with this carbon, this residue, and don't forget, we had record corn yields last year. So some of the residue, even with conventional tillage that we were incorporating, was 250, 260, 270 bushel corn on ground that normally if you got 220, you'd think you were pretty solid. So yes, there's lots of residue patterns out there. There's also lots of compaction issues out there. Growers that pushed it a bit early, we're really seeing that. Manure applications. The upside is that as we continue to get rain, we're growing through it. So this is a transient thing. We're also seeing lots of transient nutrient deficiencies. There are growers tweeting out zinc pictures, growers emailing me or texting me magnesium deficiency symptoms in corn, but all of these symptoms are transient. The crops are growing super fast. In fact, I tweeted out a picture last week, and we'll include it in the post, of the worst case of rapid growth syndrome that I think I have ever seen in corn. I think half the field was showing yellow leaves that they had flipped up. It's just growing so fast it can't make the chlorophyll. Sometimes there's some herbicide interaction there, maybe some dicamba that made it a little bit onion leaf, and then you really get that rapid growth, that yellow leaf bouncing out. But there's at least the crop will grow out of this. It is a transient thing, but lots of interesting things going on. Meanwhile, Matt, out scouting, great job, and he's tweeting out saying, you know, what I'm really noticing is that any crop that I have grown after wheat looks so much better this year than than crops growing after soybeans or growing after corn. There's just something going on. Sean, tweeting back, yep, just commented to my daughter the exact same thing the other day. And I really think this helps us understand what's happening with this residue issue, but also with the transient nutrient deficiencies. What's the benefit of wheat? The real benefit of wheat is better soil structure in the top few inches. Wheat has great fibrous root system. After wheat, we often grow oats as a cover crop or red clover, which again builds that soil structure, and it's mainly in the surface soil. But if we have better soil structure there, better internal drainage, better root growth, then the roots can access the nutrients. We don't see the nutrient deficiencies. By the way, Matt also said less weed pressure, which just tells me, Matt, you're an excellent farmer because you didn't let the weeds in your wheat stubble go to seed. And on that note, really quickly, in the deep southwest, a lot of growers did not get a wheat herbicide on either last fall or this spring, and the fleabane that is showing up in that wheat crop is absolutely harsh. You cannot let that go to seed. It won't likely go to seed in the wheat before you get it harvested. That's the upside of an early harvest. But those plants, once you clip them off with wheat harvest, they are going to be mad. They are going to be peeved right off. They're going to become a bush. And if you don't do something to control them, you are going to have fleabane seed out the yin-yang. So get out there. You can spray them with 2,4-D, not 2,4-D, MCPA ester. Even if you have red clover, half a liter of MCPA ester. It may not kill them, but they won't go to seed. So figure something out to prevent those weeds from setting seed. All right, I need to move on here. I need to talk about alert. And yeah, it is not a very energetic alert because it is the ugly beast. The beast is back, fusarium. On the Cereal Crop Committee tour last week, it is unbelievable at some locations how much fusarium we saw in the wheat crop, almost to the point of 1996. Now, it wasn't at every location. In 1996, it was at every location, so I am not trying to overplay it. But you need to get out and assess your fusarium situation. There is no such thing as resistance. We have some genetic tools, FHB1, but that's not resistance. It just stops the spread in the head. We have tons of initial infection. Heading date matters. At the Woodsley site, the early varieties to head had very minimal, like limited fusarium. It was there, and enough that you could tell it was there easily, but not enough that you'd say it was a problem. The late heading varieties, at 7 days different, they were absolutely hammered. The fungicides, because in the Cereal Crop Committee trials, we do locations, not all, but we do locations with fungicides, without fungicides. The T3 fungicides were giving good suppression, but when you have just extreme pressure, good suppression means you still have a big problem. So you really need to scout because, man, if you can harvest badly infected fields first and dry them down, anytime the grain is over 19% moisture, the toxin level, the DON level in the crop can increase. We have seen it in bad years where it could almost double with one rainfall and a humid 3-day weekend. So you just have to know where it is the worst. One other quick note. Dr. Hooker tweeting out a great study by Nakajima where lodged wheat that lodged 6 days prior to harvest, increased in toxin level, DON level, between 27 and 51%. If you have lodged wheat that has fusarium, it makes perfect sense. I said over 19%, the toxin increases. If it's lying on the ground, man, the humidity is high, it doesn't dry out as well, it doesn't dry out at all, and it's just the perfect conditions for that. So lodged wheat, susceptible varieties, and sometimes in some locations it may be the early varieties are hit worse. At Woodsley it was the late varieties, but look at heading date. Scout, because this could be a big problem. big wind blast, harvest early, dry. Do not wait for the grain to get dry. Dry it down and get it below 19%. And we still can have a great crop here in Ontario, but we need to do our absolute best to make that happen. Hey, a quick question on straw value. I'm hearing 4 to 6 cents per pound. And also they asked about the nutrients in straw. There is a great calculator that I did way back when in the agronomy guide, publication 811. It's table 4-4. You can use that. You can look that up on the internet, or you can use these numbers. There's in a ton of straw, there is about 14 pounds of nitrogen, 3.5 pounds of phosphorus, 20 pounds of potash. Now that number varies a lot based on rainfall. So this year, all the rainfall, my expectation is that potash number will be lower, probably 15, 17 pounds, not 20, and there's about 3 pounds of sulfur. So you can do the math from there. Last, I wanted to talk about big yields, and I do want to talk about this because Laird tweeting me, or emailing me rather, a weather forecast for Manitoba. Their spring wheat is going to head out around Canada Day, July the 1st, and the forecast between, I think he sent it to me on the 21st of June. Remember, for big wheat, what do we need? We need great weather from 10 days before anthesis to 2 weeks after. The entire forecast from the 21st of June till the 5th of July was ideal wheat weather. 20-degree highs, 10-degree nights. Man, if you guys get that, you have amazing yield potential. And so Andrew says, Peter, like, we have huge yield potential. We do not have enough nitrogen on to get big yields, and also to get 100 bushel spring wheat and still make 13%, 13.5 protein. What about post-anthesis N? And the answer is clear. We've talked about this lots, but yes, Andrew, 30 pounds of nitrogen post-anthesis. Let it actually pollinate. You don't want to screw up that pollination process by burning flag leaves or doing anything bad right at anthesis. But right as soon as anthesis is done, so kind of 8, 9, 10 days after it heads out, 30 pounds of nitrogen. If you can use dissolved urea, it burns less than 28%. Use streamer nozzles. Try to do it at the late in the day when the plants are dry and low pressure, lots of bounce so that it doesn't sit on the plant, but that can make you big protein and not hurt your yield. And on a year like this, that can add big dollars in your pocket. With that, oh my gosh, I am so far over time. That's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, June the 26th. Hey, keep the questions, the comments coming, and I will keep yakking for way too long next week, which will be July. See you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.